Hello, everybody. This is Frank with Iron Age News. It is Monday, May 11th, 9:41 a.m. in South Florida, South Florida Conservative News Center. We are everywhere. We are on YouTube and BitChute and Rumble and Substack and www.southfloridaconservative.com. Go there, be there. And great week last week. Once again, quick update. Florida International University's Hemispheric Security Conference, excellent. I recommend it again to everybody that is involved in this, an OSINT or a whatever you are. Go out and check it out. Very good. Also, was able to pick this up. Let me see if I can see this here. Read through it. It's going to be hard. Try one more time. This way. 12 Myths About Cuba by Frank Zimmerman. Good book. Cuba is in the news, obviously, because of a situation that may or may not occur in the next couple months. And if you don't know a lot about Cuba, Frank Zimmerman's book is a good start for you. And if you do know a lot about Cuba, get Frank Zimmerman's book anyway. Not a bad guy, makes a lot of good points. So, back to where we were. Where were we? Oh, yeah, that's right. We're talking about the peace process. Sorry there, I glitched. And the U.S. peace process with Iran, why it's going the way it's going. But the most important thing that I think we have found, as I strangle to death now because it is allergy season or something here, we're going to talk about the most important and perhaps least understood question surrounding the Iranian peace talk, which is who exactly is the United States negotiating with? Now, at first glance, that may sound like an odd question, but this is Arab politics. And the obvious answer should be Iran. But the deeper you look into the structure of the Iranian state, the more complicated that question becomes. Because Iran, or Iran, whatever, I'm going to change it up a few times, is not a unified political machine in the way many Western audiences imagine it to be, and in the way it is being presented by mainstream media, who is firmly on the side of Iran, anti the United States. There is the formal government bureaucracy. There are clerical institutions. There are business and commercial elites trying to preserve economic stability. There are technocrats. And then there is the Islamic Republican Guard Corps, the guys you love to hate, which over the years has evolved into something much larger than a simple military organization. They are a free floating criminal organization of transnational capabilities. The IRGC is deeply embedded in Iran's security services, the intelligence network, majority, political structure, and economy. And in many respects, it functions as a parallel state inside the state itself. It was put together to try to coup-proof the Islamic Revolution. And it has done a very good job and is still doing a good job of that. And it raises an uncomfortable possibility because, once again, the opaqueness of the stories coming out about the negotiations. When American negotiators are saying they are talking to Iran, are they, and this is a question, are they actually talking to the Iranian nation? Or are they negotiating primarily with the security apparatus that's dominated the country for decades, meaning the mullahs and the IRGC and things like that? Recent reports suggest that negotiations are moving indirectly through regional intermediaries, including Oman, Qatar, Egypt, Turkey, and Pakistan. That alone tells you these talks are politically sensitive and likely far more fragmented than traditional diplomacy. And it may explain why the Trump administration's messaging has often sounded contradictory. One day there are threats of renewed strikes. The next day we're talking about peace and et cetera, et cetera. At times, Washington speaks about the Iranian people almost separately from the Iranian government itself. Other statements hint at political transition or new leadership inside Iran. So from the outside, this looks inconsistent. And perhaps it is not inconsistency at all. Perhaps the United States is attempting to separate Iran, the civilization and the people, from Iran, the regime of crazy people that we've dealt with for 40 years. And that is an extraordinary difficult thing to do because the IRGC is not just an armed force that can be neatly removed from the system. It is intertwined with the system itself, economically, politically, militarily, institutionally, of course. If Washington negotiates through official state channels, it may effectively be negotiating with structures heavily influenced by, if not representative of, the IRGC. But if the U.S. refuses to engage the existing Iranian state entirely, then who exactly is left that can enforce a ceasefire or maintain an order, right? Secure strategic infrastructure, implement maritime agreements, prevent proliferation, right? Who's there to do that? Surely not the ex-Shah of Iran or his son, not at all, right? That is the dilemma. Now, all of this is taking place against the backdrop of the Strait of Hormuz crisis. Don't get me started on that, where much of the media continues to push the narrative that Iran controls Hormuz, which it does not. But that phrase itself deserves scrutiny, and this could be not a self-fulfilling prophecy, but karma coming for you. Iran can threaten the shipping lanes. It can extort money from people. It can cost insurance money to go up. It can create instability and uncertainty in maritime traffic, especially near its coastline. But disruption capability is not the same thing as uncontested military control. Different thing entirely, like the U.S. blockade. Still, politically, the narrative matters because the Iranian media benefits from projecting strength. This is going to be a textbook discussion 5 years from now at how the media became the third army in this two-army fight. One army fight, the United States whipping on the Iranians, and then the media making it sound like the Iranians are fighting back significantly and have held their own throughout the whole thing against the largest force ever assembled in the region. That's just kind of how it goes, right? And the danger there is an overplaying that hand because while the United States operates under congressional oversight, alliance management concerns, global economic pressure, and escalation calculations, who doesn't do that that's friends with the United States right now? Israel does not operate under the same constraints. And this is where the situation becomes potentially volatile, especially with the media making it sound like Iran is this big, new, strong monster with more weapons than it cares to use. If Israeli leadership concludes that negotiations are merely buying time for IRGC recovery, for them to build more missiles, or to go dig their nuclear sand up wherever that is, then Israel may decide it has waited long enough. At that point, Israel could, as we know that it is, they could slip the chain strategically and resume independent operations, regardless of Washington's broader diplomatic goals, because the U.S. is no longer in war mode. Had 60 days, actually had 90 days, but we stopped it at 66 because Trump's figuring he needs 20 more days to do something. So he's holding his numbers together. So Israel could slip that chain strategically, tactically. Maybe they decide there's some other scientists that need killing. Maybe they finally figured out where the Ayatollah is, because we know I can't say that. Yes, I can. If you saw the photograph that you believe to have been the Ayatollah, where he's missing his leg and his arm and his eye and all this other shit, like he's the $1 million man before the beginning of the season, since he is not speaking in anything that's supposedly coming from him, that he is not in the fight. The fight has moved on from him. And without their political leader, they really are at an impasse because they should be challenging, the Trump administration should be challenging the authenticity of anybody who is not involved with or is saying that they're negotiating on behalf of Khamenei's kid, because I want proof of life or cognizance, right? Like I would ask for Mitch McConnell, the same kind of thing. So that possibility of this Iranian Israeli going a little bit rogue may be one of the least discussed risks in the current peace process. The irony is that excessive Iranian declarations of victory or control can actually increase the likelihood of a renewed conflict rather than reduce it. And there is another possibility here that deserves consideration. What if the Trump administration is not actually seeking total regime collapse? A shattered Iranian state could create massive instability. You've got to realize they've controlled every aspect of everybody's life since the Ayatollah Khomeini took over. That's a lot of totalitarianism, and we saw that what happened in Russia when this all went apart in a weekend, right? There are people worse than the IRGC. Sad to say it, but there are. So let's think that this could cause massive instability. You could have militia fragmentation. You could have refugees, again with the refugees, right? Unsecured missile stockpiles, nuclear uncertainty, meaning even to the fact that those radioactive dust or sand or whatever you want to call it gets spirited away to some other group, and regional chaos stretching from the Gulf to the Caucasus. That outcome may be viewed in Washington as more dangerous than the current situation in itself. So perhaps the goal is something more limited and far more complicated. Perhaps the United States is attempting to weaken or fracture the coercive security apparatus while preserving enough state continuity to prevent total collapse. If that is the strategy, it would explain the strange mixture of sanctions and military pressure, indirect diplomacy, maritime operations, and everything else. It would also explain why it has become so difficult to answer the central question behind these negotiations of who is America talking to? And the answer might ultimately be several different groups at once. And if that is true, the real issue is not whether a peace agreement can be signed. The real issue is whether anyone inside Iran still possesses enough authority, has enough juice or enough rifles to guarantee that such an agreement would hold. So that's what we have for you now. There will be more later. We have other topics to deal with. But once again, the Frank Zimmerman books, we don't get any money, by the way. So if YouTube wants to get into this, I had to pay for the book. You can get it on Amazon. I'll put a link on there. We do not have a pay portal or anything like that because I think we have like 7 people on YouTube. BitChute and Rumble are the real channels that we do well on. So thank you to everybody who's been watching, and we will go on and on and on. Have a good day.